Chill. Good morning, and welcome back to the Tribal Sovereignty Daily Briefing. It is Monday, July 6th, 2026. We made it. The weekend is over. Now we've got the whole week ahead of us. Hope you guys had a great holiday weekend. My name is Aaron Thomas. Hauhitan is my traditional hereditary name. And before we dive into today's massive policy updates and breaking news from across Indian country, do me a quick favor. Hit that click, like, and share button right now so we can keep bringing you these vital stories. Let's get right into the headlines, shall we? First up, in forestry and resource management, the Department of Interior has announced a 10-year extension of the Indian Trust Asset Reform Act demonstration project. The new expiration date is pushed out to 2036. This program allows participating tribes to bypass heavy federal bureaucracy by creating their own forest management and surface leasing regulations. Now, why this matters: federal red tape often stalls local economic development. This extension empowers tribes to manage their timber and land use at their own pace, opening doors for local jobs and wildfire reduction. Now, why this matters to sovereignty: it transfers decision-making power from federal officials up on the Big Hill in D.C. directly to tribal governments, acknowledging that tribal leaders know how to manage their ancestral lands best. Our next section is in gaming and economic sovereignty. On the economic front, a looming federal deadline is stirring concern. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission has set a July 27, 2026 deadline for public comments on a newly proposed framework. This rule classifies online event and sports betting contracts as gaming. Critics argue this federal definition encroaches on areas traditionally managed under tribal state agreements. Now, why it matters to tribes: tribal gaming, as most of us know, the revenue is the economic engine for many nations, funding local schools, healthcare centers, and infrastructure. Overlapping digital platforms regulated strictly by the federal government could siphon away crucial tribal revenue. Now, why does this matter to sovereignty? The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act recognizes a tribe's inherent right to regulate gaming on its lands. Federal overreach into this space challenges a tribe's exclusive economic jurisdiction. All right, our next section is in cultural and narrative sovereignty. Turning to cultural narrative, Indigenous leaders are pushing back on standard American history. Over the 4th of July weekend, tribal leaders, including Stockbridge Munsee Community President Shannon Halsey and Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr., coordinated a national media push to center Indigenous perspectives during the country's 250th anniversary. A survey published by Native News Online revealed that 87% of Native respondents gave the United States a grade of D or F on living up to its ideal that, quote, all men are created equal, end quote, pointing to a long history of broken treaties and land theft. Now, why this matters to tribes: it ensures that mainstream historical narratives do not erase the heavy costs Native communities paid during the founding of the United States. Why it matters to sovereignty: reasserting that tribal nations are still here, still governing, and actively revitalizing their languages reframes tribes not merely as ethnic minorities, but as permanent, independent political nations. And our deep dive this morning is in infrastructure and energy. Today, the Hopi tribe is pushing ahead with the Pasture Canyon watershed restoration to maximize water retention and protect cultural lands from unprecedented drought. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Indian Affairs highlighted recent expansions of full tribal energy resource agreements. This framework gives tribes the power to lease and develop energy assets without waiting for federal approval cycles. On the policy side, the Department of Interior announced a formal call for elected tribal officials to join the revitalized Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee under Secretary Doug Burgum and Assistant Secretary Billy Kirkland. This committee is tasked with giving tribes a direct seat at the table to advise on federal administrative priorities, heavily focusing on boosting tribal self-sufficiency through energy development, streamlining the complex probate backlog, and increasing public safety. In sports, Hollywood, and weather, let's take a look at Indigenous sports, entertainment, and the weather. In sports, the Manitoba Aboriginal Sports and Recreation Council confirmed that the Manitoba Indigenous Summer Games are kicking off this week after wildfire delays. Week 1 will be hosted by Norway House Cree Nation from July 8th through the 12th, featuring traditional York boat races, canoeing, wrestling, and 3x3 basketball. In tribal Hollywood, Indigenous innovation is dominating mainstream entertainment panels. Prominent figures like Amber Midthunder, DeForo Winnatai, and Zahn McLarnon joined leading visual panels alongside acclaimed Canadian Indigenous designers like Leslie Hampton. The focus remains on expanding Indigenous narrative control and securing intellectual property rights. And checking the severe weather forecast, Environmental Canada has active severe thunderstorm and tornado watches in effect for Manitoba and northwestern Ontario just today. A volatile cold front is threatening regions along the international border with 100 km per hour wind gusts, localized flash flooding, and ping pong ball sized hail, posing an immediate risk to rural First Nations infrastructure. In the United States Midwest and Northeast, millions are bracing for secondary flash flooding and utility disruptions following the deadly storms and heat waves over the 4th of July weekend, which have already left hundreds of thousands of utility customers without power. Finally, looking ahead at this week's Tribal Leaders events, virtually, tribal leaders, climate scientists, and water engineers are holding follow-up working groups to map out alternative national narratives and long-term tribal water infrastructure strategies. In person and virtually, tribal leaders from the 12 distinct BIA regions are convening internal sessions this week to select and endorse elected tribal officials for the newly opened seats on the Secretary's Tribal Advisory Committee. All right, that wraps up your daily briefing for today, Monday, July 6th, 2026. Information is power, and protecting sovereignty starts with staying informed. Don't let these stories get buried by the algorithm. Click that notification bell, like this video, and share it with your community. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and we'll be seeing you again tomorrow morning with another daily sovereignty briefing.